Hello, students. Good afternoon, all of you. So, actually, I was occupied somewhere. I got late, so I messaged to write down on this link that my class will start at 3:30 today. So, anyways, I'll continue with my last lecture yesterday, which I had briefed you about the age of Dryden, and I had discussed a lot many things. In continuation with the yesterday lecture, I would like to complete a lot more details about it so that you may again understand that when you want to have a grip over the history of English literature, how you have to study in detail from your end only. So the next heading which comes into consideration in continuation with my yesterday's lecture is the Cromwell's reign, that is the Commonwealth. Still, I'm sure the students would not be clear about what is Cromwell's reign, what is the Commonwealth, and how it is so important in the history of English literature. So under this section, under this heading, I'll just brief you that yes, the king died very bravely, and many people who had been against him came over to his side. There were rebellions in his favor in England, in Scotland, and in Ireland. Cromwell and the army were soon very busy putting down these rebellions. The Irish were treated very cruelly and unmercifully. Many of them were killed, and many of the others lost their lands, which were given to Cromwell's soldiers. The Scots were beaten at Dunbar in 1650. And when the king's son, Charles II, invaded England in the next year with English and Scottish soldiers, he was totally defeated at Worcester. And both these battles took place on September 3. And Cromwell, as Lord Protector with almost monarchical powers, was successful in his foreign policy, but quite unsuccessful in his home policy. So after the Battle of Worcester, the Parliament went on governing England, but in a few years they began to disagree with the army. And a new Parliament was elected to help Cromwell, but soon he found out that he could not agree with it. So he dissolved it and ruled without one for a time. Once, some of his supporters offered to make him king, but he refused. His life was not a very happy one. The royalists were plotting against him, and many of these who had been on his side against the king objected to the power he had got. He had many troubles, and at last in 1658 he died, worn out by the hard work he had to do. Now, after this Cromwell rule comes the restoration of the monarchy, 1660. And this, this also means that yes, the king comes back. And when Cromwell died in 1658, his son Richard ascended the throne, but he liked hunting, farming more than he liked governing, and soon he gave up his post. For some time, there was trouble in England, and then the son of Charles I was put on the throne as Charles II. He was undoubtedly a good fellow. But he was not a good king. Why? Because he was all the time fond of pleasures of all kinds. Charles ascended to the throne is called the Restoration in the history of England. And most of the people were satisfied with what he was doing, what he did, but the Puritans were very disgusted with his way of living, with the attitude of his life, and the way he was passing his life. Moreover, Charles was not a king who kept up the honor and dignity of England. He neglected the navy. He neglected the Dutch, who were now great traders. With an empire in India and the East Indies. And don't forget, in 1665, a great plague broke out in England, and many of the people thought that it was only a means of the punishment from God for the wicked ways of the people. Because the plague was terrible. And while it lasted, 1/5 of the people of London had already died. And the plague was followed by a great fire, which is known as the Great Fire of London, which destroyed the greater part of the city. Old St. Paul's and nearly 100 other churches were burned down. But in many ways, the fire was a blessing in disguise. Why blessing in disguise? Because the old wooden houses which were destroyed, the germs of the plague were burnt away. And the merchants built their new shops and houses on the old sites. Sir Christopher Wren, remember this name, Sir Christopher Wren rebuilt St. Paul's and many churches and even public buildings. Charles had become the paid servant of the King of France, Louis XIV. He was trying his best to make France the most powerful country in Europe. And he wanted to bring the Netherlands under his supremacy. So Charles took money from Louis XIV and promised in return to help him against the Dutch. And Louis XIV was a strong Roman Catholic, and Charles promised that when a favorable opportunity came, he would declare himself a Roman Catholic. After this, when Charles died, James became king. He was a Catholic. Some people were against him, and they tried to make the Duke of Monmouth their king. They were soon beaten in the battle of Sedgemoor, जिसको कहते हैं Sedgemoor. And many of the prisoners taken in this battle were very harshly treated. They were tried by a brutal judge named Jeffreys, and even some were put to death. Others were sent to colonies to work on the plantations. People of England did not like this, and James began to put Roman Catholics into many important positions in the government. Some of the important nobles sent one of their number across to Holland to ask the ruler of the country to come to England and to be its king. So, William of Orange, the grandson of James I and the husband of James' own daughter Mary, ascended the throne of England in 1688. James II ran away from England and the constitutional government began from 1688, which is known as also the Glorious Revolution. And this revolution is called the Glorious Revolution as no drop of blood was shed. इसीलिए इस रेवोल्यूशन का नाम है ग्लोरियस रेवोल्यूशन. कई बार इंटरव्यूज में भी पूछते हैं कि व्हाई व्हाट डू यू अंडरस्टैंड बाय द ग्लोरियस रेवोल्यूशन, कब हुआ था और इसकी क्या खासियत है, इसकी क्या इंपॉर्टेंस है. तो जब तक आपका हिस्ट्री बहुत अच्छे से रेडी नहीं होगा, यू विल नॉट बी एबल टू आंसर दोज माइन्यूट क्वेश्चंस. इसके बाद कौन आता है स्टूडेंट्स? विलियम बिकेम द रूलर ऑफ इंग्लैंड as he disliked Louis XIV of France. And it was a bitter change for Louis XIV, for he had been in the habit of having matters very much his own way with Charles II and even with James II. William III was rather a gloomy sort of a person, and the English people never liked him. He was very quiet and did not find it easy to make friends. Indeed, his best friends were Dutchmen, and some of these he brought to England and gave them titles and large estates. James too made one big attempt to get his throne back. And Louis XIV lent him an army, and with it he invaded Ireland. James too was defeated at the Battle of Boyne, B-O-Y-N-E, in 1690. William then took his army to the continent to fight against France. He could not beat the French, but he could hold them in check. And in this way, he spoiled the plans of Louis XIV. Yes, and Queen Mary died in 1694, and William went on ruling alone until he too died in 1702. Now I'll tell you about the social and the cultural history of this century, and here it comes to know about the details about the Whigs and Tories. There was religious trouble in England when in the reign of Charles II, and in those days many of the people were very strongly opposed to the Roman Catholics. In fact, some of them actually believed that the Roman Catholics had started the Great Fire of London in 1666. Although Charles II and his courtiers laughed at the way of living of the Puritans, but very many of the English people were at that time Puritans. Although some of the people complained when the Puritans had stopped Sunday games and sports, yet there were few games played on Sundays when Charles II ascended the throne. The people were greatly perplexed when they came to know that Charles' brother James, a staunch Roman Catholic, would be the heir to the throne after him. And some of the parliamentary members tried to pass a law to prevent him becoming a king. But Charles stopped this by dissolving the parliament. There was great excitement in the country, and a worthless wretch named Titus Oates pretended that he had found out a plot to murder Charles, put James on the throne, and make England a Catholic country once more. आप देख रहे हैं किस प्रकार से इंटरनल प्लॉटिंग हो रही थी. जैसे हर जगह प्लॉटिंग होती है, जिसको कहते हैं राजनीति. राजनीति में कोई सगा नहीं होता, कोई अपना नहीं होता. So for a long time, everybody believed this man Titus Oates. The Protestants went about with swords and pistols, believing that a rebellion might break out any minute. And in the end, Titus Oates was proved to be a rogue scoundrel and was severely punished. He had to stand in the pillory and receive 3,400 lashes with a whip. But for several years, people believed all he told them. They began to take sides, and many quarrels arose between them on this question of the Titus Oates plot. And many great friendships were broken, and in some cases, the different members of a family quarreled about it. the English people became divided into two great parties, one side being in the favor of James and the other against him very soon. And these political parties began to call each other names. Those who were against James were called the Whigs. इनका एक नाम और है, Whigs या Whigamores, WHIGGAMORES. The name of some sour old Scottish Protestants को कहते थे. And those who were for James, those who were against James were called Whigs. Those who were for James were called Tories. The name of some Irish rebels and thieves को कहते थे Tories. The names of some Irish rebels and thieves. So what happened? The Whig party was the party that wanted what the Puritans and the parliaments had been fighting for in the Civil War. They wanted a Protestant king and a parliament to advise him and help him in the government of the country. They also wanted an English church of the kind that Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth had established. But they thought these Protestants who do not wish to join the English church, the dissenters, be permitted to have their own chapels in their own way. And the Tories were just the opposite of the Whigs. They stood for the things that the Cavaliers had believed in. And most of the Tories wanted a Protestant king who would be a member of the Church of England. But they favored the High Church party and not the Puritans. Many of them believed very strongly that James II was the only proper king of England. They thought that the king was the Lord's appointed and that it was the duty of the people to serve and obey him, even when they were not satisfied with what he was doing. Coffee houses began to be, or we can say coffee began to be drunk in England about the year 1656. And very soon, because of this, coffee houses sprang up. And these coffee houses were very convenient meeting places where people could spend an evening with their friends. Some of them were Whig coffee houses, some were Tory coffee houses. There were even Puritan coffee houses where no oaths were heard and no healths were drunk. And these coffee houses, people discussed about politics. But all the coffee houses were not used for politics. Persons of different trades, persons of different professions had their own coffee houses. It was here that the marine insurance was started. And the poets and the writers of the day met at a coffee house called Will's, WILL''S. And more tobacco was smoked at Will's than at any other coffee house. Clubs also were established, and there were also Whig clubs, Tory clubs. Only important persons could be members of these clubs. And in the 18th century, gambling became very popular in the clubs. There was also very much heavy drinking, and it was fashionable at clubs and parties to drink toast, especially to the young ladies of beauty. And it was a fashion in those days for ladies to wear little black patches on their face. A great writer of the reign of Queen Anne tells us that one could tell by the position of the patches on a lady's face whether she was a Whig or a Tory. When a lady went to the theatre, those who were Whigs sat together on one side and the Tory opponents sat together on the opposite side. Theatres were now a very popular form of amusement. And in the days of Commonwealth, they had been closed, for the Puritans looked upon plays as immoral. But with the return of Charles II, the theatres were opened again. And the plays of the Restoration times were very soon coarse. They show us that the life of the court and the nobility was not like that of the Puritan middle classes. There was much drinking and evil living, much dancing and gambling and dwelling, and the noble people spent large sums of money on fine suits of silk and velvet, on large beaver hats with plumes of feathers and lace cuffs and collars. Wigs too came into use at this time. Most of these fashions came from France, where Louis XIV was reigning over an extravagant and expensive court. And in the 17th century, traveling was nearly a difficult matter as it was in the Middle Ages. Roads were very poor, except for a main few roads along which the flying coaches ran and made it possible to go from London to Oxford in one day. People also used to travel on horseback, though there were plenty of private coaches. But a coach required at least 6 long horses so that it might not get stuck in the mud if the weather was bad. And much of the country was moorland and forest, even near the great towns. And there were highwaymen on the main roads. The difficulty of moving place to place kept the poor villagers in their villages all their lives. None thought of going away for a holidays. At Christmas and Easter and other holiday times, the villagers stayed at home. News reached them very slowly, although newspapers were then common in existence. And the houses and the shops had become built of bricks. Great churches were built as St. Paul's by rain, and most of the houses were built of timber and plaster. But they all had at least one room upstairs, and the cattle sheds and the barns were no longer part of the houses, but formed as separate buildings. The gardens were still cared of, and were evidently a very useful source of food and a very useful source of medicine. The poor worked as laborers on farms, and the greatest change in the village was that the fields were no longer open fields, with separate strips of land belonging to the villagers. And in the age of Edward VI, the Flemings were splendid cloth weavers, and English wool made the best cloth. So they were willing to buy as much English wool as they could get and pay a good price for it. So in many parts of England, especially in the southeast, the lords of the manor took away the strips of land from the villagers and turned them into sheep runs. But wool soon went down in price and it began to pay better to produce corn, milk, butter, cheese, and eggs. And so the owners of the land went back to the kind of farming. They divided the land into fields and surrounded these fields with hedges, and they let out the land to tenant farmers who employed poorer people to work for them as farm laborers. And in common, these changes took place, but there were many villages of England and had open fields and strips of land even in the 17th century. The farmer's house was not a very comfortable place. It had a large room with a fire back place on the one side and a big open chimney, so large that the people could sit in the chimney place by the side of the fire. The fire was made of wood, but the people who lived near the coal fields and the Londoners used coal. There were not much furniture in the room. The floor was bare ground, trodden hard by the constant walking over it, and the housewife used to complain that the wages were very low and that it was very hard to make both ends meet. And the laborers kept their gardens and pasture lands where they could keep the pigs and the poultry, which provided them with much of their food. And most of the villagers could earn money in another way. The English people now made cloth themselves, and the cloth trade was growing rapidly. The merchants wanted as much cloth as possible. Those who owned their farms were called yeomen, yeomen. Their houses were larger and cozier than those of their poor relatives. The furniture in their houses was better, and they possessed some good mugs and dishes. They were lords of the manors and had become very important person. इनको कहते थे squires, the squires. They had their pompous buildings. The squire was the lord of the countryside, and all the people of the village bowed to him when they met him, and some English writer has described somewhere about the squires that he has a large pew in the church and attends regularly to set a very good example. The people love him for he is kind to all of them and looks after the sick people, the poor people, and he also settles many of their disputes for them. But all the squires were not like him. Some of them were very rough with but little education, and they spend their time at home for they were too poor to travel abroad. तरह तरह के लोग हैं. Their sons and daughters were poorly educated. The boys spent time with the gamekeepers and the stable boys, and the girls learned very little but housekeeping and some music. So this was the system. This was the period which I am trying to discover for you, because I think you will not get any books of such kind where the details, the lecture which I am giving you, वहाँ पे इस तरह की कोई भी चीजें आपको मिलेंगी. You will find social history of England. There are books in the market where you can study it, read it, but who has the time, who has a capacity to go into the market and study all these things? But it is also true, students, that if you want to fall in love with literature, these things are also very important, but it takes time. So once you qualify NET, you can be a better, you can better train yourself as a good scholar. Now, I'll discuss with you the literary tendencies in the Restoration age. What are the literary tendencies? सबसे पहला जो टेंडेंसी थी वो थी आपकी ब्रेकिंग विद द पास्ट. जैसे कि रेस्टोरेशन में, एट द रेस्टोरेशन, द ब्रेक विद द पास्ट वाज एब्सोल्यूट, एंड द रोमांटिक स्पिरिट ऑफ द एलिजाबेथन एज फेडेड, and by the year 1660 only John Milton survived, and in everything he was of the past, and this is why he is called the last Elizabethan. सब्जेक्ट हो गया, स्टाइल हो गया, सब कुछ एक नया स्पिरिट लेके ले आया, एक नया आउटलुक लेके आया, एंड हेंस द पोस्ट रेस्टोरेशन पीरियड इज ऑफन सेट अप एज द कन्वर्स, उल्टा, एंड एंटीथेसिस ऑफ द प्रीवियस एलिजाबेथन एज, एंड इट इज कॉल्ड क्लासिकल एज अपोज्ड टू रोमांटिक. And the court of Charles too was the most shameless England had ever known, and the reason was infidelity. Reason was profligacy, which became very fashionable. The moral ideas of Puritanism were turned into jest, and those who still upheld the cause of the domestic virtue laughed at as hypocrites or denounced as sour secretaries. Even outside the narrow circle of the court and aristocracy, where things were at their worst, the spirit of corruption spread far and wide. And while pity and goodness were of course cherished among the individuals, the general lowering of the moral tone was everywhere apparent. And the real earnestness of purpose has passed away. And with this, the creative energy. And lacking the genius of the Elizabethans, they turned to the classical writers of the age of Augustine. And this habit was quite noticeable during the time of the Dryden, deepened and hardened during the succeeding age of Pope. So much so that the latter laid down as a final text of excellence. वो लाइन याद करिए आप लोग, learn hence for ancient rules a just esteem. To copy nature is to copy them. And literature became intellectual rather than emotional. And with the Restoration, we may notice that it had become intellectual rather than imaginative or emotional. And though brilliant is on the whole a trifle hard and unsympathetic, they thus evolved a number of rules where it can be summarized in be correct. Correctness means avoidance of enthusiasm, moderate opinions moderately expressed, strict care and accuracy in the poetical techniques, and humble imitation of the style of the Latin classics. Dryden has this new tendency clearly marked, and Dr. Johnson says of him, Augustine, that Dryden did to English literature what Augustine did to Rome, which had found of brick and left of marble. It is in this respect that the men of the Restoration were the real creators of a modern English prose. Speaking about in detail imitations of the French, that the European supremacy of Italy had passed away and France had become the world's great arbiter of taste. The political relations between the two countries naturally had tended to give vogue in England to all the things French, including French taste and the French ideas of art. And the contemporary literature of France was characterized particularly by lucidity, by vivacity, and by reason of the close attention given to form, correctness, elegance, and finish. It was essentially a literature of polite society and had all the merits and all the limitations of such a literature. It was moreover a literature in which intellect was in the ascendant and the critical faculty always in control. It was to this congenial literature that English writers then learned to look for guidance. And thus, a great impulse was given to the development alike in the English prose and in English verse of the principles of regularity and order and the spirit of good sense. So, students, are you all here? So, how many could listen this entire lecture? Just message me. Students, are you getting my voice? चलिए. So, आपको ये लेक्चर अच्छा लग रहा है? Should I move ahead? Okay, Shreya. So actually, this is a lecture which some of the parts you might find in my books also. But when I teach in the class, it becomes a big umbrella, because in my books you will find in a very precise manner, but in my lecture it is lot more. So you can enjoy this lecture because listening is something which is much better than only reading. So ये सारे फीचर्स हमने आपको बताए. अब अगर हम बात करें ड्राइडन की, तो वैसे थोड़ा सा लेट हो गया है आज. अभी हमारा जो है टेस्ट सीरीज क्लास है. ऑल ऑफ यू आई थिंक आर रेडी फॉर द टेस्ट. आपका जो कल का टेस्ट था, कुछ बच्चों ने बहुत अच्छा किया है, कुछ ने एवरेज किया है, और आई होप कि आज आप कुछ और बेटर करेंगे. और एक चीज मैं आपको यहाँ बता दूं, जो भी आप लोग सामने बैठे हैं सुन रहे हैं, कि ड्यू टू सर्टेन some reasons, tomorrow I am not able to take the class, because of certain commitments which have come immediately. So I tried to manage, but I don't think so that I'll be able to return timely at the time of the class, and maybe even the test series. So tomorrow for both the classes, that is the class as well as the test series, it will be a gap that is only for tomorrow, and from day after tomorrow you will have both the classes. So just note it down everybody that कल है आपका कौन सा दिन है वेडनेसडे Wednesday will be a break for you, and on Wednesday you will be covering a lot many things and a lot of homework you will be completing. So students, आज इस लेक्चर को मैंने कंप्लीट किया है. Just listen to this lecture once again and try to imbibe, try to read, and try to locate every age, whether it is Anglo-Saxon 14, 15, 16, 17, और हमेशा जब कोई भी हिस्ट्री पढ़िए तो ऐसे पढ़िए कि जब आपसे कोई पूछे कि 16th सेंचुरी में क्या था, 17th में क्या खास बात थी, तो आप इमीडिएटली अपने सबकॉन्शियस से उस पोर्शन से उसको निकाल लें. आपको बहुत समय ना लगे कि हाँ ये ऑथर कब का था या क्या था, इस एज की क्या ब्यूटी थी, इस एज में क्या मोनार्की थी, कौन से ऑथर्स फेमस थे, कौन से राजा ने क्या किया जिसके वजह से वो राज्य ऐसा हुआ. सो दीज आर द क्वेश्चंस which should come into your mind, and my classes will help you in locating those questions internally for you to ask yourself, and then accordingly you prepare it. In this way you will be far more ahead compared to the other students who are just reading it. So I hope you will all follow my guidance timely and religiously, and would conclude one day with the certificate of NET, which hundreds of students have done. But yes, you should have faith in your studies, my studies, and believe in the best and your hard work. So students, we will end today here, and after 10 minutes we are going to meet once again for the test series class. Thank you.